Now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the subjunctive, adjective clauses. Adjective clauses can take the place of an adjective in a sentence. So, for example, I have a blue pen. The adjective in the sentence is blue because it describes the pen. Now, for an adjective clause, you replace the adjective. I have a pen that writes well. That writes well takes the place of the adjective in the sentence because it's describing the pen. Now here are some examples in Spanish. Tengo una amiga simpática. Simpática is an adjective describing amiga. Well, we can replace that adjective with an adjective clause that also describes that friend. Tengo una amiga que me escucha. Now look at this sentence. Una amiga que me escucha. What tense is that? Our options are subjunctive or indicative. Escuchar is conjugated in it just like the regular present tense. So this would be the indicative. The indicative is the word that we use when we're talking about present tense, imperfect tense, present progressive tense. All those tenses that you learned in Spanish 1 and Spanish 2, and at the beginning of Spanish 3. So sometimes we can have adjective clauses that have verbs that are in the indicative, but we can also have adjective clauses where the verbs are in the subjunctive. So here are two more sentences that are talking about more adjective clauses. Quiero un amigo generoso. Generoso is an adjective describing un amigo. And this whole que comparta conmigo is an adjective clause that describes un amigo. So the second sentence is quiero un amigo que comparta conmigo. But look at this verb, compartir. It's in the subjunctive. Why? It looks like these sentences are the same. I mean, we've got a verb in the yo form, and then we've got an adjective clause. But why is one indicative and one subjunctive? It all has to do with the meaning of the sentence. You use indicative for people that you know exist. So the clue here is this word tengo. Tengo means I have a friend. I know a friend who listens to me. This person exists in real life, and they have listened to me in the past. I know they're going to listen to me again. That's why that is in the indicative. You're sure that this person is a real person. Versus quiero. Quiero means I want. I want a friend who shares with me. That doesn't necessarily mean that I have that friend right now. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'll find that friend in the future. And since I don't know if that person exists, I put the second part of the sentence, the adjective clause, in the subjunctive mood. Here are some verbs that are commonly used when setting up adjective clauses. In other words, these verbs go in the first part of the sentence. Tener, conocer, and haber. You could say, I have a friend, or she has a friend, or you have a cat. If you know somebody, obviously it's indicative because you know they exist. And then finally, haber, the form that you're familiar with is I. That means there is or there are. So I could say, there is a student who always does their homework. Finally, we use the indicative mood when we have definite article. A definite article is like el, or la, or los, or las. And it's basically expressing the. Because if we're talking about a specific person, or dog, or friend, we know that that thing exists, or that person exists, and so that puts it in the indicative. So here are some example sentences that would all take the indicative mood in the adjective clause. Conozco al profesor que nunca da tarea. This verb, dar, is in the indicative because, first of all, we know the teacher. And second of all, it's the teacher, not a teacher. If you're talking about a specific teacher in particular, you use the. I know the teacher that never gives homework. The second sentence, hay un pingüino que sabe bailar. This verb saber is in the indicative tense because we have haber here, or I. I means there is, or there are. So we know that this penguin exists. For that reason, we put saber in the indicative mood. And finally, here's a question. ¿Conoces a la chica que está durmiendo? We know that there's a girl who is sleeping because we have la. Now here's a list of verbs that commonly cause the adjective clause to be in this subjunctive. Querer, because if you want something, it may or may not exist. Buscar, because if you're looking for something, it may or may not exist. And necesitar, because if you need something, it may or may not exist. You also use the subjunctive when there's a no in front of the verbs that would normally cause the indicative. Tener, conocer, and haber. And finally, you use the subjunctive normally when you're talking with indefinite articles. Indefinite articles are the opposite of definite articles. Whereas definite articles are talking about a specific thing, indefinite articles are talking about something in general, like, do you know a teacher versus do you know the teacher? Or do you have a piece of candy instead of do you have the piece of candy? Usually with indefinite articles, you're talking about something in general that may or may not exist. And that's why all of these take the subjunctive. But don't worry, we're going to look at some examples. So here are some examples of verbs that imply the subjunctive when they're used with adjective clauses. The first one is querer. Queremos un amigo que no diga nuestros secretos. What this sentence is saying is that we want a friend that doesn't tell our secrets. But we don't know if somebody like that exists. We don't have the friend right now. It's a friend that we would like to have. So because of that, and because we don't know if there's somebody out there that will keep our secrets a secret, we put this in the subjunctive, and we use diga. The second verb is buscar. So here's a sentence, buscas una novia que sepa cocinar, which means you are looking for a girlfriend that knows how to cook. That doesn't mean you have a girlfriend right now. It doesn't mean you know anybody that knows how to cook. Just because you're looking for a girlfriend that knows how to cook doesn't mean that you'll find one. And so because of that, we use the subjunctive form of saber, which is sepa. And then finally we have necesitar. Necesito un teléfono móvil que sea bonito. Just because I need a pretty phone doesn't mean I'm going to find one. And I don't have one in mind right now. I'm just thinking, it would be really great to have a pretty phone. So since there's a lot of uncertainty, I use the verb ser in the subjunctive, sea.